All right. Last part. This is part 3. Hopefully will be the last one. So question number 7. What is stewardship and incentive? Well, stewardship is basically taking care of something. We are stewards of God's earth. He owns it. We steward it. But even our own private property, we have to steward it. So we manage it and care for it. So anything you have that is yours, your phone, your clothes, anything that like really you claim as your own and nobody else has any rights to, how you take care of it and make it last is stewardship. Okay, so incentive is really interesting. We have found out historically that people tend to act better when they are motivated, really adults. Now with children you have to discipline them. Like if they do something wrong, there's immediate pain. Whether it's a scolding or a spanking. It teaches them negative association of bad things because a lot of the bad things that they can do can really, really hurt them. But once you get to people who have started to really develop rational cognitive thought, they're not going to respond to disciplining or punishment. They respond better historically to giving them a reward for doing something well. So an incentive is something that motivates you to act. Now, we use grades in school to motivate you to give us good work. That way we can affirm that your work is quality, and that we can push you to doing more excellent work. Now, you might not be great in a certain field. I wasn't a great math student. But my grades and the consequences of my grades, notably college scholarships in the immediate future, then so on, and then stuff like beyond that, it motivated me to work harder on my math, get my grades in order so I could go on and get like academic scholarships for the colleges that I went to and music scholarships for the colleges that I went to. So that's how incentives work. Obviously, money is an incentive. I'm going to pay you, and you like getting paid. So you're going to cut my grass because I don't or can't cut my grass. You can. And you're not going to probably do it for free. And if you do it for free, you're probably going to just like mess around and not do a good job. So if I pay you, you are incentivized to do better work. And the example of the public bathroom versus the private bathroom is really interesting. You go to a public bathroom, gosh, especially in a large urban area, in like a subway or a gas station. There's a Stuckey's on I-10 in between Texas and going from Lake Charles to like Houston, Texas. Our church youth group when I lived there stopped there a few times, and there was one time that someone had vandalized it with various organic materials, and it looked like a crime scene. And it was just sitting there. Nobody was. And so this is my response. This is how the whole public versus private bathroom illustrates. I go in there. I see that. I turn around and walk out the door. I'm not having nothing to do with that. There's health issues. There's safety issues, and actually, it's not mine. Moved to Georgia a few years later. The same type of thing happens. Only this time, it is in my bathroom, where an overflow toilet that a friend of mine caused. Forced me to get down on my hands and knees in some pretty filthy situations, and fix the problem. There were still the health concerns. I mean, I was dealing with somebody else's leftovers, food, okay? And there was still the mess, and it was still gross, but this time it was my bathroom. And guess who had to take care of it? I wasn't going to make my wife do it. I wasn't going to make my friend do it either. They were humiliated, and embarrassed, and they didn't want to deal with it, and I wasn't going to unleash my wrath on them. So I was just like, hey, it's my bathroom. I gotta clean it up. And the funny thing is, you or your parents would do the same thing. You will be in that situation where your apartment, your house, something happens that's disgusting and gross. You're going to have to crawl under a basement, or you're going to have to crawl under your kitchen counters, or you're going to have to bust out a shop vac or a plunger in your bathroom, and you're going to have to deal with the issue. And that we see that repeated over and over again. If it's mine, I'll take care of it. If it's everybody's, nobody will take care of it. And if you want an illustration of that, just walk through don't go to Mardi Gras, but like go through New Orleans after Mardi Gras, go through a city after a big music festival. So everybody's is public. I'm not going to fix it. We see that time and time again. So, question number 8. What happens when the government, through welfare and other aids program, removes incentives for work? And we are dealing with something with that right now. The unemployment checks that came out with the initial stimulus package from a few weeks ago are, I think, $600 a week for the stimulus funded unemployment. That is $600 a week is more than what a lot of people make. Why do I need to go to work when I can sit down and not work and get paid more than if I go to work? If I go to work and make $400 a week, why do I want to keep doing that if I can get $600 a week for not working? In fact, you could even argue that I have a moral responsibility to not work if I'm going to get paid more for sitting on my butt and watching Netflix. This is actually better for my family. It's better for me. And so, like, we're watching that happen right now. And it's not, I'm not saying that everybody on welfare is lazy. I know people who have been on welfare. I know people who've been on food stamps before, and they've worked their tails off to get out of it. But I am saying you'd certainly create, and I do agree with the conservative economical position, you create a ton of incentive for people to do nothing when you make it so that they can survive doing nothing. And that is a terribly, terribly dangerous place for society to get to, because a society that can't produce can't survive. They're just waiting to get walked on and taken over by somebody else. And so, while you don't, like, out of Christian charity, you don't want to label welfare recipients as lazy, but a system that rewards non-production creates a very dangerous situation. The entitlement mentality comes because what else are you going to do but ask people to give you what they promised? And again, just like this, the whole like unemployment package, if it is more beneficial for me to sit at home and pull in $600 a week for my family, I'm probably morally right for doing that. Now, I do want to draw one contrast. In the Old Testament, the Israelites had a welfare system set up where the poor were taken care of, but the poor were taken care of because out of the generosity of individual rich people. And in an agrarian society, it was probably pretty easy to pull off. I think what you see in our society is when we tithe to churches, and those churches in turn fund charitable organizations within a community. But what the people who owned land would do is they would lease sections of it and not harvest them. And then the poor in the community would come through and they would work for their share of that person's land that they left and designated to the poor. And so it was a welfare program that Israel, that God instituted for Israel, and it caused people to work, to still work for what they were given, even though they did not own the land to provide for themselves. They were still able to work the land and take care of themselves. And actually the slavery system in Israel was set up to do that as well. It wasn't a matter of Israel just going and conquering communities and getting slaves for free labor. The slavery system was a lot of ways used in Israel to pay off debts. There were prisoners of war that were taken as slaves in Israel and used as slave labor, but the option of that was like leave them in their own communities and let them just starve to death. And so as God's judgment on these nations that had gone to war with Israel and that Israel had conquered, some of their people were taken as slaves, but those slaves were provided for. They weren't left to starve or left to be murdered by their own, leftover countrymen in some kind of dystopian, like, siege state, which those got way ugly. So there were welfare systems set up for the poorest of the poor and the slaves in the Old Testament that were probably superior to what we have today. Question number 9, does the Bible view wealth and prosperity negatively? No. And the answer that we're supposed to use with scriptures, a lot of you provided some from Proverbs, talking about how God gives wealth and how we're supposed to use our wealth. But basically, being wealthy is not bad. Barnabas in Acts was wealthy. It is widely suspected that Theophilus, that the book of Luke and Acts was written to, was a wealthy benefactor of Paul. Lydia was wealthy. Some of the people that were involved in Jesus' ministry were wealthy, and used that wealth to further the kingdom of God. So no, wealth and prosperity are not evil, and they're not viewed negatively. Greed, selfishness, and putting your hope in your money, loving money, is viewed negatively. That's where the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Money is not the root of evil. The love of money is the root of all types of evil. Let's see. 10, reflection question. How much of your resources, time, space, and money do you give to the less fortunate? A lot of you guys provided some good answers. Here's where I would recommend. If you get an allowance or get a part-time job, and I'm not saying you have to tithe 10%. I'm all about the 2 Corinthians. Give what you feel is appropriate. Find ways to contribute, if not to your church. I would recommend you tithe to your local church because they can distribute that money in ways that benefit the kingdom. And I mean, if you're going there, you're trusting them to do right by you. So, I mean, think about that. But also find a ministry or a missions organization that you can give to. I would obviously suggest Mission Serve, but there's the Crisis Pregnancy Center in town. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. There's Harmony House. Fountain runs a house we call Stillwaters for women. It's a women or needy families shelter where they can live rent free for a while until they get back on their feet. There's Harmony House. That's for women. That's for battered women and children. There have been a couple of men's ministries. There's been a couple of counseling ministries. Refuge Point Church, I think, is very involved in some of those. We've talked about the Crisis Pregnancy Care Center. Find a place to give to. That's one way to support. That is one way to support people who don't have what you have. Give to Plentiful Harvest over in Uganda, man. Connect with our church and connect with some of the people I know. I've got friends over in Africa that are saying, like, if I don't work today, I don't get food. And so, like, when you have the means, like, find places specifically that you believe in, that you can invest in and feel good about giving to, and give a little bit. If it's more than they had, right? And don't be coerced into doing it. Like, do it because you want to be generous. And so, that's the end of this section. I'll fill you in on some more stuff like later this week, and we'll look at some assignments next week. Your test will be next week, probably close to Friday. Hope you have good luck. You won't have much to do next week in this class, so review. Make sure you're caught up, and make sure you're doing the activities well and fully. Thanks, guys. And if you need anything, hit me up on Google Classroom or email me. Hope you guys are doing well. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.